Hello, Team Ripples. Hello to anyone who has stumbled upon this YouTube video or the podcast, the Ripples podcast. I am so excited to be live with about 50 people. And if you're watching the recording, we're just great to have you with us as well across the space-time continuum. My name is Paul. A lot of people know me as the Ripples guy because of these little emails that I send out every Monday that are assembled with love from a whole bunch of Ripplers who share good quotes. And we are up to 1,300 and some odd Mondays we've been hanging out with each other. And if you're hanging out and new and you don't know Ripples, we have a little pebble, boulder, ponder in the Ripples, two quotes and something to think about for the week. And we follow a similar format in our monthly Zoomy Zooms with the Team Ripples Patreon community. A pebble is a resource that I'm using in my work or using in my life. And then the boulder is an activity that I'm using personally or professionally. And then the ponder is the meat of our content. And I'll give you a little secret today. Our three hopes are actually our pebble, boulder, and ponder for the day, because the third hope is where we're going to spend most of our time. And I will make every attempt to be putting some links in the chat as I talk, and I will be referring to those. And for those of you who are listening or watching and not live, it is my intention to put all those links in the show notes. So just go head over there and look. I also have some slides. If you're watching the video, if you're watching me live, you'll see some slides over my shoulder. If you're listening, I will pretty much remember usually to describe what's up there. You're not missing too much. It's just more to help us all keep on track with an outline. Let's get to drafts up here. And before we dive into our pebble, our first hope, I do want to take a quick temperature of the room. And some of you will be familiar with your NLH score. And if you're not, this is a really simple set of numbers that I'm going to ask you to think about. On a scale of 1 to 10, if I asked you right now, how's your energy and mood? That's your N number. And then next to that number, I'm going to have you, and if you're taking notes or typing this, you can just jot this down in a second. I'm going to invite you to share in a moment, along with where you are in the world today. But the next two in the parentheses are what's the lowest number that you have hit regularly lately in terms of energy and mood, and what's the highest number. And just before I invited people into the room, I asked myself what my scores are. And today, on a scale of 1 to 10, right now, I'm feeling at an 8. And my lowest score I've regularly hit is a 4 in the last few weeks. And the highest number I've hit, which is the first time in a long time where the number 9 has been hopping up lately. I feel like spring arriving is helping me too. So I would love it if you made your way over to the chat, and if you feel comfortable sharing your numbers. I do this for a couple of reasons. It's really helpful for me to see where people are at right now and to help normalize that for most of us, life is a range of numbers, and that it is true that you might be super, super struggling. And it might help a little bit for you to know you might be comforted by the fact that you might not be the only one. Or even if other people are having a better day today, notice they've been struggling lately a little bit too. And congratulations to all the folks whose low number is 5 or above. Yay for that. Um, yes. So that is your NLH score. I really appreciate you all sharing that. I'm seeing lows, lots of 2, 3, 4 on the lows. And we're kind of all over the place today, too. We've got some lower scores and some medium and some higher scores. So wherever you're at is okay. It's my sincere hope that possibilities exist to bump that up a little bit during this call, and maybe some of that will last a little bit as well. I'm going to change that chat there. Um, oh, yay. Somebody's 4.5 decades old today. That's awesome. Happy birthday, Melissa. I'm glad you're here too. Let's talk about hope. I have come across a couple hopes I had never heard of before this spring, and I gave a talk a few weeks ago to my friends in the campus recreation world, NERSA, and they've been hanging out with me since the very beginning of my career. Many of them were among the first Ripplers back in 1999. I started sending out the weekly emails, and just a few weeks after that, I was hanging out with them in Milwaukee for my first NERSA conference. And 26 years later, I just got to hang out with them again for the first time in many years, and it was awesome. And one of the things I talked about was this thing called slow hope. And it came to me a few months ago from my friend Pidge, sent me this Instagram post, and I'll put the link. I'm not expecting you to be able to read that if you're looking at that. I just wanted to have a visual up there. There's the post so you can see it. And I'm going to read it to you. It was a post from a therapist that the post said six things therapists know about that you might want to know about as well. And where did I put? Well, it's not here. I'll click on the link and read it to you from there. It was printed out on here yesterday when I printed out the notes. Um, so when you click on that link, you'll see it says six terms that come up in therapy that everyone really needs to know. Slow hope is a form of hope that acknowledges the gradual nature of change. It is not putting on rose-colored glasses, and it does not ignore the difficulty of waiting for something we really want. Slow hope encourages sustained action and helpful narratives, even when results seem cloudy, uncertain, and unknown. Like planting a tiny seed, a giant tree doesn't sprout overnight. It takes time, patience, optimism, and work. That's what slow hope is. It's not the kind of hope that flashes with urgency, immediacy, or expectation. It's a quiet, steady glow. I was intrigued by the idea because it seemed like gentle and accessible, even if you're struggling. And I was curious to learn more about this idea of slow hope. And I did some digging, and what I found was that it didn't, in fact, come from, hold on just a second, the missing notes. It didn't originate in the therapy community. Where I found an origin of it was in the environmental climate change space, where a number of years ago, I think 2015, somebody had coined the term slow violence to talk about the ways in which the challenge in the climate space to try to wake everyone up to these things that are happening in our world, but because they're happening slower and it's sometimes hard to see the destruction that's happening on a day-to-day basis, somebody came coined this dramatic term, slow violence, to help people understand that even if it's slow, it's problematic. And somebody countered that and said, yes, that's true. I agree with that. And we do need to keep waking people up. But one of the things that's happening to all the folks that are trying to do all the waking up is that the more they talk about all of this slow violence that's happening, they are losing hope. They are increasingly frustrated and in despair. So he said, I think we need to also talk about slow hope and the fact that sometimes hope and help arrives more gradually. And he ended up writing this really dense, long, thorough academic paper in 2019 that is, if you want a deep dive, it is really remarkable. He makes a case for what slow hope is and why it's worth looking at. And a couple of the main points he's making is that there are all these examples of situations that seem dire and really problematic, where change didn't come overnight, but improvement happened gradually. He talked at length about asbestos, and he mentioned some other examples like seatbelt, smoking cessation. There were lots of things where there were public health or public issues that really needed addressing, and there was some urgency to them, and the change didn't happen overnight, and it changed. He also had a great example from within the climate space about how when wind turbines first came out in Germany, where he's from, they in 2011 they were sort of laughed at and mocked, and there were lots of cartoons of them in opinion pieces because they broke a lot and they were very expensive and they weren't as effective as the original hope was for them. But at the time that he wrote the paper in 2019, several years later, I believe the number was 15% of Germany's energy is now coming from, and that number may be higher. This was a 2019 number. 15% of their energy was coming from wind farms. And so that even though change doesn't necessarily happen as fast as we want it to, or in some cases we need it to, that doesn't mean that change isn't happening right now, and that change there is reason um, to have a gentle, slow hope that the things will continue to improve. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say about slow hope. I think that's it. Um, the So that's the pebble, slow hope. Although I'll leave by asking you right now, yes, I want to ask you right now, if you look back on your life in personal stuff, work stuff, um, community things, things happening in the world, can you think of a time when you did not feel hope, or you felt like things are not happening at all or not changing fast enough, where then eventually things did get better to a point where maybe it didn't work out completely okay, but it got better enough that it made a difference, and things got better. I think it's so important to remember that when we feel hopeless or when we're feeling despair, it's really easy to think that that's a permanent state, and that's like sort of proof that of how bad things are. And all feelings are valid, and our feelings sometimes fib. And feeling hopeless, we shouldn't use that as proof that there is no hope available. It's just that we can't see it right now. And I think slow hope, especially if you're struggling with what's going on in the world, with what's going on in the environment, with what's going on for you in your personal life or in work or at school, that slow hope is, I think, a gentle, accessible place to start in. When we're ready for a little more, I want to revisit something we've been talking about. Our session last month, last fall, we reviewed this, our 5-year-old now sticker that's We Got This. And this is the second hope, which I call resilient hope. And I'll tell you, we're just going to talk about it for a few minutes today. And in the materials that we post afterwards, I want you to know that last fall we created a 13-minute video and podcast episode that was just a concentrated version of going through these 4 steps. We created, if you're new to the sticker, we pulled this together in March of 2020 because I became convinced that we got this. We can get through this weird COVID pandemic thing we were entering. I didn't know how long it was going to last. I didn't know how bad it was going to get, but I was convinced that we got this if we come together and focus on 4 things. Serious minds, asking ourselves, what's going on here? How can I grow through this while I go through this? How can we set aside the judgment that sort of stamps out curiosity and get in learning mode? Open hearts, cutting ourselves slack, cutting other people slack, extending generosity and kindness and compassion. And then calm spirits, accessing the calm that is inside of us all the time, even when things are really chaotic, even when there's all kinds of stuff going on around us. And that it's not only possible, but it's essential that we practice accessing those calm states, even when things are really hard, especially when things are chaotic or in crisis. And then the fourth one, all these 3 things taking place while we nurture our health, which originally, when we created this sticker, we were really focused on physical health, wash your hands, social distance, eventually slap on a mask kind of stuff, but really quickly evolved into a more holistic view of health. Your physical body, yes, and your emotional well-being and your spirit. And then we've continued to expand this, and we now talk about community health as well. And what I really am proud of with this content that we sort of initially it was a sticker and it turned into COVID coping presentations I was giving by the summer. And I've been talking about resilience now for several years using this model. And we cross these four resilience pillars with three stages that people are often visiting when they're going through challenge and change. When they're immediately something happens that's hard and scary and problematic and dangerous and yuck, the first thought is often we get into surviving mode because either our physical, spiritual, emotional well-being is at risk or we perceive it's at risk. And when we get through surviving and we know, okay, I'm safe, the basics are there, we can focus on reviving energy, getting back to normal, creating a new normal. And then hopefully we get to taste thriving energy again. That kick butt, let's go out and do more than just get by. And what I really like about the longer version of Resilient Hope is that we cross these three stages of dealing with challenge and change with these four resilience pillars, and we end up coming up with 12 specific actions that people can do when they have enough energy and they are actually in reviving mode. So, how I've been thinking of these three hopes is that slow hope is a surviving hope. It's when you're really struggling, can you start with something basic? And then resilient hope is it possible? Are you ready to bounce back a little bit, get back to normal, create a new normal? What's the path forward to stretch your muscles, and ask yourself, where's my curious mind at? Where's my open heart at? What do I need to start with surviving? Am I ready to step out a little bit? Am I ready to do the hard part of that piece of it so that we can grow? So let me pause here real quick and add two things. Oh, and my friends, if you don't yet have a sticker and you would like one, I'm including in the links here. I'll include in the show notes a little Google Doc that we made up. We have given out over 8,000 stickers since April, late April. No, actually, March. We were shipping these by March 20th and 21st. And we've given out over 8,000 of them, and I'm so proud of that. And so if you want one for free, great. If you can pitch in money, all that money will go to buying more stickers and other goodies. That's great too. So you've got options there. Let's dive into the good stuff. Um, a few weeks after discovered slow hope and knew that I wanted to talk about slow hope in my talk at NERSA, and I was already thinking I'm going to be processing this with my Patreon peeps and my Team Ripples members soon. Uh, I was doing some homework on a weekly ripples. Somebody had sent in a really interesting quote by Joanna Macy, and I wanted to make sure that the quote was accurately sourced and that I had the quote right. And I did a quick Google search, and I came across a thread post that had the quote just as it had been presented to me with Joanna Macy as the source of the quote. And then below that, the person who had posted the quote said, by the way, if you haven't read Joanna Macy and Chris Johnston's book, Active Hope, you need to read it. You will feel more hopeful after reading it. And I was like, shut up. What is this active hope that I've never heard of? And I Googled it and found my way to the book website, and where they had you could access the introduction and the first chapter for free. And 45 minutes later, I said, oh, yes. And I quickly ordered the book and had it express delivered so that I could read it and digest it. And in the name of slow hope, I was overwhelmed when I got this book that was, it's not a huge book, but it's a book that I wanted to read. And I had 2 weeks until I was going to Orlando. And so I decided let's just baby step this. And I read a chapter every morning and digested it and thought about it. And then at the end of 11 days, I was ready to draw some larger conclusions and tell the short version. And I've learned a lot. I picked up a lot of information that was helpful. And Folks who've been watching these Zoomy Zooms know that if there's one thing that I'm trying to continue activating my curious mind about with this content is I do tend to want to tell you everything. And part of the challenge and opportunity of these is how do I condense it and give you the highlights? And hey, maybe this fall, maybe over the summer, some of other people will want to get this book and we'll do a book club or a book, follow up and do a deeper dive. But for the purposes of our time together, I want to talk about the difference between hope and optimism that I learned a little more about. And then what is active hope? And the main piece that I really like in this book is something called the spiral of work that reconnects. And we'll dive into that. And I think, again, regardless of what your is heaviest in your heart and in your head today, as far as feeling like you'd like to have more hope. If it's the general state of things, that's enough that we need some hope for. If there's a specific challenge you're facing, I invite you to just really be curious, which piece of this is for me for today. And I can always go back and re-listen to this later or read the book when I'm ready for the deeper dive. So don't get too worried if it starts to feel overwhelming, just pull back and just say, what's the piece for me today? One of the things that's really helpful for me that this helped framed it, and it reminded me when I did a presentation on hope a couple years ago for the Patreon community, is that we in the English language, we tend to use the terms hope and optimism interchangeably, and we often talk about different kinds of things, and we mean different things. And I'm not interested in changing that. That's perfect. I think it's for most everyday use. It's perfectly fine to to use those terms interchangeably because they mean close to the same thing. But I think for the purposes of talking about active hope and really getting down to nitty gritty and whether hope is a useful thing, because some people feel like hope isn't a strategy and hope is just wishful thinking. And the way psychologists, the way research in psychology sets up these two traits, they are very different traits. Optimism is about what we expect or we wish would happen. And a person is optimistic to the extent that they believe a specific outcome is going to happen or all the things are going to work out the way they want them to or the way they believe they're going to. And hope is a related trait, but instead of being a wish, it's a combination of a desire for what we want to happen and having a plan on how to get there. And there's actually when they're measuring hope as a psychological trait, there's also a component of it that involves agency. Like not only do I is there a plan to go get it, but it's actually possible. There's you have some agency to say I can work towards that. And um and the people who put together this active hope book, they actually make a distinction between active hope and passive hope that is very close to what I just described, the difference between hope and optimism. So they really describe active hope. Passive hope is something you wish for and wait for it to happen. And um, active hope is something you do. It's something you want, and it's a what am I going to do to make this happen? And so it's really important to know that active hope is something we do. It's not something we have. So we know that in the English language, hope can be used as a verb and hope can be used as a noun. And active hope is the verb. They lay out and they return to these three steps to engage active hope. And the first step is that there's nowhere you need to get to start activating your hope. You start with where you are with a clear-eyed view of the situation, a realistic things are bad. It's not oh, that's okay. It's not that bad. It's nope. We got a problem. We're in crisis, or there's chaos, or this thing just happened. This divorce just happened. This death just happened. This stuff is going on. This policy just got implemented. And then identifying what do I want? What's the what's the direction that is going to move me not just away from the current situation, but towards the situation I want. And then that third step is, what do I got to do to start making it happen? I really, I think one of the most interesting distinctions I got out of this book is that you do not have to have optimism that things are going to work out in a certain way for you to employ active hope. And if you think about working on a campaign for a candidate or for a cause, if you believe it's a worthy cause, if you believe it's a worthy candidate, the thought with active hope is that even if the odds are long, or even if you believe there's really no good way, there's no feasible path for this candidate to get elected or this cause to actually be passed in this election cycle, and it is still vitally important that we're moving in the direction we're moving, that we're talking about the things we want to talk about. So when you have a value that's important to you, when you're acting on that value, you actually don't have to have optimism that the thing is going to get to where you want to get it to work towards that. And instead of feeling defeated by the long-term outlook doesn't look good, the diagnosis, the doctor says this, that doesn't mean it's not worth us staying positive today. What's the thing that will help increase my healthiness today and tomorrow? And let's keep working on that path. Um, and I think that's really relevant. Again, another one of the really valuable takeaways from this book is and I should also tell you that active hope, like the term slow hope, did grow out of the environmental climate change space. And a lot of the examples in the book are really focused on environmental stuff. And listen to me, if that's not your cup of tea, it is so easy to take this and apply it to different things. I would encourage you to still dive in and look at this. But but one of the interesting things is that they were talking about is there are three stories right now of narratives that we are using to describe the situation we're in when it comes to again, the example they're using is the environmental situation. I think it is I've been applying it mostly to the state of the world right now. And the first story is called The Great Unraveling. And that narrative is we are witnessing the end of the world. We are witnessing things as we know it falling apart. And it is a slow, steady, destructive cycle. I want to point out that I think all three of these stories are valid. I think all three of these stories are the narration. I use all three of them, I think, at times. And there are consequences to how you act and how the world acts if that's the narrative they're in. The second story is that things are business as usual. Right now, things are really hard. It's just a variation on the normal. And once we work through this difficulty, it's going to get back to normal. And the third story is called The Great Turning. And this is a narrative where there is a great transformation taking place. One period is ending and a new one is dawning, or um, a cycle is happening and we are moving from one stage to the other, caterpillar into butterfly. The seasons are changing. And if we look at the what's going on in the world right now, I don't think it matters what your political persuasion is, what your philosophy, your beliefs. I think most people are like, we're in a hot mess right now. We're not getting along with each other. We're not getting what we think needs to happen. I don't think there's anyone right now that is satisfied with how things are in the world. Some people are, upset over here for this, and some people over here are different. It's not what we want. If we look at the great unraveling, the narrative is we're watching democracy end. We're watching the way the US has been working. It's just no longer working. And in the case of the environment, right, some changes are taking place that we're probably not going to be able to pull back from. And just the news a couple days ago was about they're now some scientists are suggesting that actually even at this temperature that we're at right now, that the ice sheets are not going to be able to stay ice, and that we're looking at permanent change. Business as usual is not denying all of that is happening. It's just saying this is a variation. This is a part of the ebbs and flows of life, of politics, of life and death, and we're going to get back to some kind of stasis in the near future. The great turning is saying, yes, this is awful. Yes, this is uncomfortable. Yes, people are really being infected by what's going on. And part of what's happening is we're getting ready to go through a transformation, or we're in transformation right now. And the example that I found really helpful, I dreamed up on a walk a couple mornings ago as I was practicing sharing this with you. I thought about it, what it would be like for aliens to come land on our planet just to observe, not to do harm to us, just to watch, just to learn. They had their curious minds. They heard about the sticker and they were like, okay, we're going to come with curious minds. And they landed in January, and their job was to spend a year just observing all of the planet, the ecosystem, everything. And it was their first observation, because they landed in the northern hemisphere, is that it's sort of a desolate place because it was wintry. And at some point they're observing and they're moving around and they're watching spring happen. And they see all these things start popping up out of the ground that was surely a sign of life and renewal. And they were taking notes and really liking this, and then watch this summer happen where all of these things that were barren have leaves, and the weather seems like all the creatures are liking it. And then imagine what they would write down in their little journals when they started watching the leaves change, and what surely would look like these plants are all dying. And the conclusions they might reach when they watch everything return is that, oh, an ice age is coming, or the end is nigh. And the renewal that seemed to happen is no longer happening. And I think I think it's worthy. I think it's the the great turning. It is worth us pausing to consider how that might change how we're thinking, might change how we're feeling, and might change what we're doing as we think about this. And there were three questions that popped up in the book, um, about that helped me remember why they call it the Great Turning. And the questions for pondering is, where and how are you turning up? What are you turning away from? And again, regardless of the frame that you're using to apply this to, if are you thinking about the world, the state of politics? Are you thinking about environment? Are you thinking about your budget cuts in your work? Are you thinking about some personal stuff that's going on in your family? How are you turning up to have an impact on this? What are you turning away from? Are there things you're turning away from that was the old way of doing it, the old way of thinking about it, that are no longer serving you? And what are you turning towards? What's the new thing? Are there habits? Is there information? Is there engagement that you're turning towards? New habits you're picking up, for example. And that takes us to, so once we have a handle on these three stories, and which frames are going to be most useful as we engage with active hope, is they spend the bulk of the book talking about the spiral of work that reconnects. And I will tell you, the image that you can see on my screen right now is, I made it with Chat GPT 24 hours before my speech, because as I practiced my talk for NERSA, I was really wanting to have a visual to talk about these four things. And I found a whole bunch online, but they just weren't right. They were kind of fuzzy and weird, and They didn't have clear. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, I need help. Can you make me this thing? And da 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 da. And she said, whoa, absolutely. What color palette would you want? And I was able to literally plug in the hex codes for the colors of um, the NERSA folks put together a style palette for the slides for all the presenters to use for the conference. And so these are the exact colors that they use. I was so proud of it. And you will see there's two little errors with this. It's not perfect. Coming from gratitude got wrapped around on a line and it forgot the word with. So down at the bottom here, it says seeing with new eye. It says seeing new eyes. And I tried saying, ChatGPT, this is so good. It's so close. Can you do this and this? And then it just didn't. Um, and so I copied and pasted and made fun of myself in the presentation that it's not perfect. These four steps, if you're familiar with the term a virtuous cycle, where the little pieces of a cycle of behaviors of points end up working together to move things up, this is a virtuous cycle. And the idea that is we are going to start with coming from gratitude. So again, regardless of how you're thinking about applying this to a challenge, to a difficulty, to a mess that you're experiencing that you would like to have more active hope for, coming from gratitude really is saying, what can I experience gratefulness for right now? What are the things that are good despite all the bad? What are the tools I have? What are the who are the other people that care about this with me that will hold my hand as we deal with this? And that groundwork is really important because if there is only despair, if there is not a start that is juicy, we just are not going to be able to sustain active hope. The second piece is what they call honoring our pain for the world. I think it's more accurate and more useful to talk about honoring the pain in the world or honoring the pain that the situation is causing if we're talking about a specific micro thing. And recognizing with clear and open eyes, how is this impacting me? And why is it so awful? How is this impacting other people? Why is this problematic? And sitting with that a little bit, letting ourselves be sad, letting ourselves be frustrated, letting ourselves feel despair for a while so that we can recognize that's how bad it is. Each of those got their own chapter, but I'll tell you these next two steps got their own section of the book. And there were actually 4 or 5 chapters of seeing with new eyes and going for it. And this is where I want to be gentle with myself and with you about how deep we go into this. But I want to give you at least chapter titles and tell you a little bit about what the authors were talking about with seeing new eyes. Because the idea it's about a perspective shift. You know, the idea of seeing with new eyes is really about changing your perspective. And the four things that they asked that just reading and reading this book a chapter at a time over the course of 11 days, it's sunk into enough that I can't get away from it. I've been using it in my life. I wouldn't say daily, but I would say several times a week for various things. The first perspective shift is having a wider sense of self. Is we tend to, especially we here in the West, the Westerners, USians, we tend to think of ourselves and only ourselves in lots of situations, and expanding what we mean when we're talking about ourselves and our team and our people, so that it includes more than just literally I, the person. Shifting our view of what power is, and they really helped me think more deeply about the difference between power over and power with, and how many times in our culture, when we think of the word power, we're talking about power over someone or something else, control over someone or something else. And it is true that there is a power when we talk about empowerment and we're giving um, motivation, inspiration, encouragement to somebody, that what happens, what they do with that expands. It's not about a fight over with someone. It's how do we recruit that? How do we combine that with our power and do good things with it? So power with instead of power over. And then this third piece is a richer experience of community and who we call us and how we think of what we've traditionally thought of as us versus them. And our ability to our ability to recognize that our foes look at the world differently than us, that they have different priorities than we do, that we don't necessarily share all the same values, and we do have some things in common with them. And by the way, our fate is tied to theirs. Um, we, especially in the US right now, for the last many years, both of our main political parties have definitely been operating from our way forward is to defeat the other side, to vanquish the other side. And our only choice on issues that we most care about, abortion, um, bathrooms, trans civil rights for trans people, immigration, is the other side people are wrong and are bad, and we're right, and we have to defeat them. And our, I believe, only chance of figuring this, we're going to figure this out. I'm positive of that. We're going to find our way through this. And it's not going to happen until we remember in our country, there is always going to be a group of people that see abortion this way. And there is always going to be a really large group of people that look at abortion this way. How are we going to set policy? How are we going to decide how to set policy that will accommodate two different views of this? And that is really hard. But if we think we are connected, we are neighbors, and there is no chance of getting out of this locked room we're in, this escape room, there is no chance of getting out unless they get out also, and unless we have their help. And it's not going to be easy to get there because we are so entrenched. How we raise money for the different parties, how we keep people galvanized is by demonizing the other side. So this isn't going to go away anytime soon. And when we're ready, it's a different frame is waiting for us. And this last one is a larger view of time. And I really found this useful to remember how important it is to zoom out. And I have been using the number 180,000 years, and some of depending on what you mean by how long have humans been on the earth, there's slightly different numbers used. But the first civilizations, what we would say civilized humans organized civilized is about 7,000 years old by when you ask lots of people what do we call this, so for many 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 thousands of years we weren't even organizing ourselves in anything that looks like a government. We've had governments of some kind for about 7,000 years. Democracy is a very very young form of governance. And we're proud of it in lots of ways, and it is very problematic. Our fledgling democracy did some remarkable things, and oh yeah, we've done some really awful things, and it is an imperfect union we have. And one of the things that's required is that we have to be willing to think in terms of decades because this mess we're in is not going to be fixed at midterms. It's not going to be fixed next year. It's not going to be fixed in the next decade. And our willingness to say, what can we be working on that when it's time to start fixing things, I will be proud of the work I've done, that there is evidence that we move things in the right direction so that 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, the world is in a better place, the environment's in a better place, democracy, or the thing that comes along that's better than democracy, um, is working. And the going for it, that's the actual action in active hope. And it turns out that if you don't have an inspiring vision, if you don't have a compelling vision, it's like organizations that don't have a clear mission statement or a goal that isn't really laid out in terms of what it looks like. It's really hard to make steady progress towards something if it's not defined and if it's not compelling. And so spending some time, this book actually has a couple examples of ways to develop an inspiring vision for yourself and for your community, for your team, for the committee or whatever. And then daring to believe it's possible, even when the odds are long, not inevitable, not even likely, but possible is really the space that we get to when we really believe this is possible. That will fire up our action engines and keep them going despite setbacks, despite long time. And then building support around you, finding other people who believe in this, remembering that we helpers, listen to me. There's still 47 people in this room hanging out with me. More than likely, you're here because you're part of what I call a community of professional helpers. We aren't people that just go out and do. We're the people who help other people do. And we helpers are research I did in grad school. We helpers are awesome at helping other people. And we are awful at taking care of ourselves. I forgot. Sorry, I just turned on sprinkles by accident because I put both my thumbs up. Um, Yeah, it's very gay that what happens, and that's okay. I can see that, but it is because when I do this, you'll see it more when I turn it off. But like um little fireworks go on behind me. But I'll show you when the slides are off. But the last thing is maintaining energy and motivation. And as somebody who gets labeled a motivational speaker, it is awesome when I have the motivation and it is not there um, without showing up for Zooms like this, finding the people and that inspire me and spending time with them. And there were, where is my active hope? There was one thing I saw when I looked at the notes that I'd forgotten about. There was this great activity, wandering the world with grateful eyes. Oh, just so good. I should work towards wrapping up, so I'm going to resist the temptation to try to find it. But there were a number of activities in the book to talk about how to sustain. Oh, thinking of motivation as a renewable resource, and that we all feel depleted and we will be depleted if we don't tend to ourselves in the right way. But if we think of energy and inspiration as a renewable resource, it might help guide us to better decisions about how we take care of ourselves and how we do this. Yes, Melissa, perfect comment. She just put in the chat. The longer view of time reminds me of the quote about planting trees in whose shade we will never know. Yes, so good. So this spiral to me has been in the last few weeks a great source of comfort and hope because it gave me some specific things that I see that I um could work on, but so much of it is stuff that I knew, but I wasn't necessarily thinking, oh, I need to put these and apply these in a certain order and help other people do that as well. And I think it's a practice. And I think we can, I don't know if I have that sticker here. Some of you know I have this little sticker with a smiley face. I know where it is. I know where one is if I stand up and, oh, I disappeared. Sorry. Boom. I used Harry Potter magic. This little sticker, feel better, think better, feel better, do better. And I put together that talk. It's sort of based on if you look at counseling models, some are focused in emotional, focused on how you're feeling. Some of them are behavioral, and some of them are cognitive based. But the idea is that how you think affects how you feel affects what you do. And I really like this model because it has a bunch of entry points that relate to how we're how we're feeling. And I don't mean how we're feeling, I mean how we're feeling. Um, and how and which can influence we're thinking. Um, yes, we will be sharing the recording, I promise. And one of the things I wanted to close with two things, and then we'll wind down and ask some questions. Um, Somebody came up to me at NERSA during the Q&A period and told me a story, and it's really stuck with me. And I tried to Google it, and then I tried to chat GPT it, and chat GPT told me to just say, well, why didn't you just say that a person came up and told you the story and you don't need to know the actual source? I'm like, oh, it seems really not legit. But since I couldn't find a source, I will tell you that a person came up to me after the end of my during a Q&A period afterwards, and I believe he said it was two Greek philosophers. It may have been Plato and Socrates, but he was talking about a really um, debate that two people were having, and it got really acrimonious, and shouting words and unkind things were said. And either during a break or at the end, someone came up to one of them and said, "Wow, that's really got ugly in there." And the person responded, "Oh, it's okay. He's my friend. He just doesn't know it yet." And I have applied that maybe 6 times in the last few weeks when I am thinking about somebody that either I'm frustrated with, that isn't doing what I need them to do, that isn't responding the way, or that I can't even get their attention. And it's like, oh. And I'm like, oh, they're my friend and they just don't know it yet. And it changes how I think about them. It changes how I want to show up for myself to represent myself. And it makes me keep thinking, what can I do to increase the chance that this other person hurries up and recognizes that I'm their friend? How would a friend respond in this situation? And that gave me hope. The last thing I want to do is read something um, that was in Ripples a couple weeks ago that has really informed this presentation. And Alok Vad Menon is a stand-up comedian, activist. They use the pronouns they, them, and a longtime Rippler, somebody who was a student 20 years ago that is still an active part of the Ripples community, shared a clip where Alok was being interviewed, and they said something, and I don't know if this was something that they had written out and performed sometimes. It just was so remarkable to me. And what they said was, look, everything is horrific, and alongside it is hope. Everything is dark, and alongside it there is light. When we have these algorithms that are so tuned towards catastrophe, brains, in fact, that are so alarmist that we forget the practice of noticing beauty. To rewire my brain and my heart is to speak aloud the things that I find beautiful. And that gives me hope. There's such a smorgasbord of beauty around us, and we often feel guilty in naming it, or as if that detracts or cancels out the severity of what we're facing. We feel like we have to choose. And this last line is where they bring it home, because they said, I don't think it does. What the universe is always asking us to do is to become bilingual. And I close today inviting us to step a little farther away from the dualistic nature of how we're thinking about so much, and dip our toes in the ripply waters of non-dualism and say, is it possible that we can see the awful that is happening in the world and to see the beauty, to see the people that are behaving in ways that we're pretty sure is contributing to the problem, and see that they are human, that they are worthy of us wishing good for them. May they be healthy, may they be safe, may they be wise, may they be at peace, may they hurry up and change their mind about how they think about that issue. And can we recognize that there's also lots of other folks like us who are looking at the world right now the way we look at the world and who do believe some of the same thing we do. We aren't as alone as we sometimes feel. My time has come to an end, and I do want to reserve a couple minutes after the we turn off the recording to see what you're thinking about, what you're feeling, and what you're going to do. But let me close by just saying really quickly to the folks here with me live today, it is so valuable and precious to me that you give me permission, and you invite me to process this because this is all new information for me. It's more digested than it was 2 months ago when I came across it, but it's still a work in progress. And Bart gives me permission to not need to apologize for going long. But I want you to know that having an audience allows me to process this, allows me to be a student as much as to be a teacher. I'll give you the recording. I'll make sure that all the resources are available. And right now, I want to end by sending you peace.